Hi. It seems like that short video we did on shared ownership was really popular because loads of you have contacted us to ask if we can go into a bit more detail. So I'm actually going to do a series of fairly short videos where we talk about each different kind of part of what shared ownership is. So how to get the mortgage, how to apply for a shared ownership property, what you should be thinking about if you're considering doing shared ownership. So this is the first one in the series, and this one's really going to cover the basics. So what is shared ownership? Well, shared ownership is where you buy part of a property and then you rent the rest of it. So you're not buying the whole property. It's run by housing associations. So it's not every property that will be suitable for shared ownership. It's only those ones which are designated as shared ownership. And so it's part buy, part rent. And I've kind of done a bit of a Blue Peter special to kind of show you what that looks like. So imagine that this is your house, right? Here's a property, here's what you want to buy, right? This is the whole thing. And let's say that it's a flat worth £300,000 and you're gonna own part of it and you're gonna rent part of it. And so imagine that you're gonna take 40% as your owned bit and then 60% as the rented bit. So normally when it comes to shared ownership, you can buy between 25% and 75% of the property. And the reason behind it is it's intended to help people who might struggle to be able to save up for a deposit on a whole property. You know, house prices now are so much higher than they were for like our parents' generation, and so it's so much harder for us to save for that deposit. And so the whole idea around shared ownership is that it gets you onto the property ladder earlier because you're not having to save up quite so much. So as I say, like you're owning part of it, this 40%, and then you rent the rest of it from the housing association that you buy it from. So it's a little bit of a hybrid, and I think that's kind of what makes it a little bit confusing for people. So let's go through kind of what each part means for you. So let's take your 40% that you're going to own. So how do you work out how much you can actually afford to buy in the first place? You know, you can get between 25% and 75%, but how do you work out how much you can afford to buy? Well, on your owned bit, you're still going to need to get a mortgage in the normal way that you would even if you were buying the whole property. So that usually kind of sets the amount that you're going to be able to buy versus rent. So if we say, let's say that this house, this flat that we want to buy is worth £300,000 and you're going to buy 40% of that, right? So that means, I'm scribbling down here, that you would be effectively buying, it's like you're buying like a standalone property, but you're buying it and it's going to be worth £120,000, right? So it's like you'd found a magical flat worth £120,000 and that is what you were going to buy. So you will need to get a mortgage unless you've got that whole £120 sitting somewhere. If you have, please tell me, I'd love some of it. So you're going to be getting a mortgage on that £120,000. So for you to work out, can I afford this? You can use our home finder tool at lifetise.com/home finder. You can put in your salary and it will tell you if you're going to be able to afford to buy a property that's worth £120,000, right? That's your kind of starting point. Can I do this bit? And when you go and apply for a mortgage, you're going to need to check whether the particular mortgage provider is able to lend and give you a mortgage based on shared ownership. Now, most of the high street banks will, but you do need to check because although you'll go through this exact same process getting your mortgage as you would if you were buying the whole property, some mortgage lenders choose not to lend against shared ownership for whatever reason. So you just do need to check. So you'll be getting a mortgage on your 40% bit, on your 120,000. So what does that mean? That means that you're going to still have to save for a deposit in the usual way. Now, one of the things about shared ownership is that quite often you can put down a 5% deposit instead of a 10% deposit, which then makes it a lot easier for people when they're trying to save up. So that's kind of one of the benefits of shared ownership, that often you're able to do it with just a 5% deposit, which will make it much quicker for you to save, and they're much quicker for you to get the property. So you need to save for your deposit. You need to then apply for your mortgage in the usual way. So you'll have to go through all of the standard mortgage checks. They're going to want various documents from you, and we'll go through that in a later part of this. So that's kind of the bit that you're going to buy, and that you're going to go through the same process as if you were buying a normal house. And then there's this 60%, right? So there's the rest of the property that you're going to rent from the housing association. So how that works is you take the value of the rented bit. So again, remember we said £300,000 flat. You're buying 120,000 of that, which leaves the rented bit worth £180,000. And the way that it works is that you're going to pay your mortgage on that 120,000 bit, and then you're going to pay rent to the housing association on this 180,000, so there's 60% of the property that's left. And rent can vary. It's usually somewhere around between 2 and 3% of the rented bit's value. So here you would be paying 3% of 180,000. And so that works out as £5,400 a year, or it's £450 a month, right? So you're going to be paying whatever your mortgage ends up being per month, plus £450 per month in rent to the housing association. So when you're looking at shared ownership, you need to have a good look at your finances and work out, can I afford to pay every month my mortgage plus the amount of rent that I'm going to have to pay to the housing association? And when you apply for a shared ownership property, you have to go through various checks, and we'll go through that in the next video. And one of the main checks that they're going to do is whether you're able to afford both your mortgage and your rent, because you've got two different payments that you have to make each month in order to be able to stay in your property. So just to kind of recap on that, shared ownership is where you own part and you rent part. And the part that you own is where you will be paying a mortgage on that. And then the part that you rent, you'll be paying rent payments every month on that bit. So in the next video, we're going to look at more specifics around how do you actually apply for shared ownership? How do you find shared ownership properties? And what is that application process? And then how do you go through the mortgage and the rent checks, which are all these financial checks they're going to do? What is it that you're going to need to be able to show them? And then we'll look at in the final video, we're going to look at some of the pros and the cons of shared ownership, so that you go in with your eyes open, you know what questions to ask, you know what you're looking out for, and that's it. So thanks for listening to part 1. Part 2 is coming next, and then part 3 will be on the pros and cons. So I'll see you for the next ones.